what color was Jesus? And I raise this because among some blacks, they like to believe that Jesus was black. And I don't know if you've heard that or not. So I thought it would be worthwhile covering that topic too. And here's a portrayal of them, and there are others who portray them as a different style of a person who's black. But this, you can find lots of things if you do a search on the web for it. And so they've liked to produce the idea that Jesus was actually a black person. But this is highly unlikely based on genetics, just looking from a genetic perspective. And the reason was Jesus was a Jew. And he would have been the same skin color as the other Jews, because he would have inherited that from his parents, who were also the same skin color. And the Orthodox Jews now have only bred with other Jews, and they've been careful about that because God said that that's what they should do. And so they've carried on their genes consistently, and they are light-skinned right now. If you go to Israel and you see the Jews who are there, you will see that they're just a slight coloration, just not even as much as Esther, if I can say. And so they're just a slight darkness, but they're basically white with a hint of color.
But he would have only had one set of genes. He wouldn't have had Joseph's genes. I mean, God was. I mean, we can't think of Jesus as having genetics like the rest of us so much. I mean, God could have done anything he wanted with Jesus' skin color. I mean, I think it's probably more likely if he looked like all the other ones around there at the time. That seems the most likely. But, I mean, it's weird because human genetics, he would have only had Mary's genetics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it would make more sense that God would have said, well, I'm going to make him look like everyone else, because his description was very little description, just wasn't much to look at kind of thing.
Right, nothing special.
So you would think that if he looked incredibly different from everybody else, if he was really dark-skinned, really light-skinned, tall or something, the Bible would have mentioned that. So,
right.
So he didn't have two sets of genes. He had one set of human genes, I'm guessing. Right?
Well, we honestly don't know. He would have had to have had two sets of genes, but where did they come from? Did he get two copies of Mary's? Don't know.
Yeah.
There's.
Well, I guess since he himself was going to make and reproduce, he could have been walking around with one set of genes. I mean, who knows? But, but I think it's more likely he looked like kind of like all the other people around there, because that would have, exactly. A lot of people would have been looking at him like, whoa.
Right. And all the other people, all the other Jews were light colored skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that was just from the genetic perspective, so we see if the Jews were dark brown in Jesus' time, and Jesus was also dark brown, then that would make a sense. But how could that have ever happened that only 2,000 years ago they were dark-skinned and now they're light-skinned? Well, there's nothing in the world other than killing people that could produce such a thing, and that hasn't happened. So what happened shortly after Jesus' time is the Jews dispersed across the whole world, and there's no pressure that could have forced the whole population of them to have changed from dark brown to light brown, especially when they're distributed across the earth like that. And so there's simply no way that it's possible that the Jews at that time were dark-skinned and therefore Jesus was dark-skinned, and now they're somehow all white-skinned or light-skinned. And so that's all genetics. Now we're going to look at what the Bible says about this. And the Bible does say a little bit about the color of one person that Pastor was talking about. And what the Bible says about her, and this comes from Song of Solomon, that she is a black person, and she is noticed as being different in color by the people. And these are her own words from Song of Solomon. She says, I am black but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem. So she's talking to them. She's saying, I'm black, and you daughters of Jerusalem, notice that I'm different from you. And so she continues on talking about that for a little bit. So she's saying that she is black, but despite that, she's beautiful. And so there wouldn't be any point for her to make that statement if everybody was black at the time. So they weren't. She's distinguishable by her color. And so she continues on in the next verse and says, do not stare at me because I am swarthy, and swarthy means dark-skinned. And so she's saying that she is noticeably different in color. She's a very dark-skinned person, and they aren't dark-skinned people. And so the only reason that they would stare at her was because her skin color was different enough, and her other characteristics possibly were different enough as well. And so That makes complete sense because Abraham came from a geographic region where skin color was lighter, and he moved south into Israel, and so he would have carried that light skin color with him, and it would have been that way. Even it continued on through his children that way because of the wives that they married. But so Jesus had to have been light-skinned. He wasn't distinguishable, as Chance was saying. And we see here back in Solomon's time that his wife was black-skinned and she was distinguishable, and people found her to be an unusual sight, being as dark-skinned as she was. So that's the end of it. Any questions, thoughts?
Going back to the Zipporah thing, that it states from Ethiopia. Do we know that people were black back then in Ethiopia?
Yes, it seems like it. People can't be perfectly sure about any of these things, but what they follow is the travel patterns that people have and the countries that they've set up and what's happened with those countries. And so the Ethiopians were there. The Bible talks about Ethiopia as being a country and a people. And so we know that those people that were what we call Ethiopians now had settled in that area of the world a long, long time ago, and they have continued on in that area of the world. So that gives us some confidence that there hasn't been a major shift in population. And so
it necessarily doesn't talk about her skin color, it just says where she's from, right?
yes, for her, yes.
Because when Saul was going to be picked as king, they only describe him as being a head taller than everybody else, but they don't say the numbers. Right?
Yeah, right.
So I guess it's not that important.
No, it's not that important. And it's only being said because they want to impress you that idea is that he was taller than everybody else and he stood out because of it. Yeah.
But they do say, I think it was Absalom, that he was very handsome and that he had thick hair.
Yep.
And he had to cut it and they would weigh it and all that stuff, but that's it.
Yeah.
They don't go into too much detail.
No, they don't. And it's always to make a point. God always has a purpose in bringing up these characteristics, and he's trying to show you something. It's never to distinguish people or to say that one is better or greater than another. Nothing like that is ever done.
That's what I was thinking. This is a process that God has created within people, human beings themselves. It's not for him. He doesn't do it because he diminishes one over the other or has a preference for one or the other. These are things that mankind has brought up upon themselves.
Yeah.
But this is not coming from God at all. He doesn't care about those things, you know. And I think he loves everyone equally, independent of what we look like. But unfortunately, the failings of mankind is such that they attribute things that are not really part of God's plan.
Right, yeah. And going back to what I said about the anthropologists, they've given up that idea of basing groupings on genetic characteristics like that because it doesn't tell you anything useful. If you say that a person is a particular color, that doesn't tell you anything you can predict about what that person is going to be or do or what he's going to choose to do with his life. None of those things that might matter are based on those skin colors or other facial characteristics like that.
It also says that Leah had weak eyes.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what that.
I don't remember that.
Glasses.
Yeah, but they didn't have glasses. She needed a Coke bottle.
What do you think about Numbers 1? It says, could you read it? Could you pronounce better than me? Numbers 1.
It says Miriam.
So Stan,
It says Miriam and Aaron.
the purpose of this.
Hold on, he's talking here. Just a moment. Go ahead.
It says Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife.
Yeah, Cushite. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. For he had married a Cushite. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? They asked. Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this.
Yeah. Yeah, and that story goes on, and it's quite an interesting story. They're getting on his case because he married a Cushite. Now, a Cushite is west of Egypt, in northern Africa, and the people there are right now, and probably still were then, a little bit not dark. You wouldn't say that they're like your color, about like that, and so they're not white, but they're a shade darker than that. What does that dictator he used to be in there.
Around which region?
Northern Africa. He got into a big fight with the U.S. in fighter planes, and ultimately,
Oh, Muammar Gaddafi?
Yes.
Libya, wasn't it?
yeah, Libya. Yeah, that's Kush area there, and that's where he's coming from. So he had married a person